I moved to a small mountain town a few weeks ago. I was 32, working as a social worker and wanted a change. The snowy mountains and cozy cabins looked perfect for a fresh start. I thought I could finally relax. I didn't know how wrong I would be. My first night was quiet. I sat by the fire enjoying the calm. I noticed flickering lights from the neighboring cabin. Nobody seemed to be there. I found it odd, but shrugged it off. Maybe the light was just old. I didn't feel scared. I was just curious. As days passed, things got weirder. I heard children's laughter outside even when I thought I was alone. It felt like it echoed through the trees. I was sure nobody else lived nearby. Shadows darted past my windows, but when I looked, nothing was there. I told myself I was imagining it. One afternoon, my neighbor stopped by. I think her name was Agnes. She was friendly but made me uneasy. She talked about the town and how Christmas was coming. When she invited me over, I felt nervous. Her smile was wide, but it seemed too big, too forced. I didn't ask her why she wouldn't let me step inside. I just wanted to leave. That night, a cold draft swept through my cabin. It made me shiver. I figured the windows were just drafty, but something urged me to close the curtains. The flickering lights returned, and later I heard whispers outside. They sounded like children talking. I froze. My heart raced in my chest. What was happening? I looked out my window. It was dark, but the snow glimmered. I thought I saw movement again. It sent chills down my spine. I pressed my face against the glass, searching the night. I saw nothing but darkness. I turned away, reassuring myself that it was just my imagination. Later that week, the voice returned. It was clearer this time. I thought I heard someone calling my name. My heart raced again. I stood up and walked to the door. The cold air hit me as I stepped outside. The laughter faded as I stepped into the night. It turned silent. Too silent. I shivered and turned back. Just then I felt it, a cold breath on my neck. I spun around, but there was nobody there. My pulse quickened. I felt a knot of fear in my stomach. I quickly went back inside and locked the door. The next day I spoke to Agnes again. I told her about the whispers and shadows. Her smile faded slightly. She said something like, "Sometimes the children come out to play." I didn't understand but felt uneasy. Now I sit by the fire again, but it doesn't feel comforting anymore. I hear laughter outside, but there are no children. The flickering lights are back. I don't want to look. I don't know what's outside, and I fear it knows my name. I barely slept that night. Shadows danced across my walls, and every creak of the cabin felt like a warning. My mind raced. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. I woke up to the sound of laughter again, clearer than before. It was so close it made my skin crawl. Morning arrived with a dull light filtering through the curtains. I drank coffee while debating my next move. I wanted to find out more about the children Agnes mentioned. Something deep down told me I had to. The whispers were becoming unbearable. On a whim, I decided to visit the local library. I needed to know if there were any stories about the area. I found a small, dusty building, barely noticeable among the trees. The librarian was an older woman named Ruth. She had a warm smile, but her eyes were sharp. After I explained what I was looking for, she peered at me over her glasses. "You should be careful. The mountains hold secrets, especially during this time of year." I felt chills run down my spine. As Ruth pulled out an old book filled with town history, she mentioned a tragedy that struck decades ago. Families had gathered for Christmas before a sudden snowstorm hit the town. A group of children had gone missing, never to return. There was a hushed tone in her voice as she recounted the tales. It felt strangely familiar. As she spoke, the whispers returned, tickling the edges of my consciousness, almost an echo of their lost laughter. I didn't want to believe it. "Are there stories about other people who heard them?" I asked, my throat tightening. Ruth nodded slowly. "They say some people have felt their presence," she said quietly. "Often they try to communicate with those who move into the area." I left the library with a heavy heart. The weight of the town's history pressed down on me. After hours of reading, I had more questions than answers. Christmas approached, and the cover of snow felt thicker than ever. That night I sat by the fire again. I hesitated but finally pulled the curtains back. Outside, the snow glowed softly under the light of the moon. It was beautiful, but that beauty felt sinister. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, but just like that, everything went dark. When the lights flickered back on, I was no longer alone. A small figure stood at the edge of the clearing, barely visible through the trees. It looked like a child, but as I blinked, it vanished. Panic surged. I stumbled back, heart racing. Was I losing my mind? Then, I heard it. A voice whispering my name. "Help us." I gasped. I knew I had to do something. The children were lost, and I was the only one who could hear them. But what did they want from me? Why me? Now I felt a mix of dread and determination. I had to find out. As I stood frozen in fear, the laughter returned, echoing louder, and I knew I was in this deeper than I ever intended. I took one step forward, feeling the snow crunch beneath my feet, and that's when I saw it. A figure moving toward me through the trees. The laughter swelled around me and I realized I wasn't alone in the dark anymore. I took another step, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. The figure drew closer, but I still couldn't see its face. All I could hear was that laughter, bright and playful, mixing with the fear coursing through me. "Maybe it's just a trick of the mind," I whispered under my breath. But deep down I knew that voice had called to me with a purpose. I edged toward where I thought I saw the child, trying to stay calm. My breath hung in the cold air, swirling like the memories of those lost children. Then I saw it again, a flicker of movement just beyond a cluster of trees. This time, I could make out the silhouette of a small person, clad in a faded red coat. "Wait," I called, surprised at my own courage. I didn't want to scare it away. "Please, can you help me understand?" The laughter faded abruptly, replaced by a silent tension so thick I could almost choke on it. Suddenly the child turned, and I caught a glimpse of its face illuminated by the moonlight. The features were unmistakably that of a child, but the eyes were deep and sorrowful, as if they held untold stories. My heart clenched. "What happened to you?" I asked, my voice shaking. The figure stepped back, uncertainty clouding the air between us. It raised one hand, pointing toward the nearby woods, and just like that, it vanished into the shadows, leaving me frozen in place. I stood there, caught between the urge to flee and the need to decipher what had just unfolded. Before I could regain my composure, the wind whispered through the trees, a chilling reminder of the town's haunted past. I realized that following that child might be the only way to uncover the truth. Swallowing my fear, I pushed forward, deeper into the darkness. The snow crunched under my boots, each step echoing in the silent night. As I moved toward the edge of the woods, the laughter returned, fainter but still present. It became a haunting melody, beckoning me further into the untamed forest. I felt connected to something ancient, something that tied me to those children. Then I stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an old, decaying cabin, almost hidden beneath the weight of the snow and the gnarled branches. My stomach dropped. This was no ordinary cabin. It was filled with an atmosphere thick with despair. Against my better judgment, I approached it. The laughter suddenly stopped, replaced by an eerie silence that screamed for attention. I could feel that something was waiting for me inside, something I had yet to understand. One last breath settled my nerves as I reached for the door. It creaked open slowly, revealing a dimly lit interior, a totally different world from the one outside. Faceless dolls lined the walls, their eyes watching, judging me. I took a cautious step inside, and that's when I heard it again. "Help us." This time it came from within the walls, amplifying a dozen lost voices, and I felt the weight of their pleas like a physical shroud settling on my shoulders. I had to make a choice, to turn back or confront whatever truth lay ahead. I took a deep breath and stepped fully into the cabin. That's when I saw the flicker of light in the corner. It was not just a light. Something was moving there. My mind raced. What had I just walked into? The light flickered again, casting weird shadows across the room. I squinted, trying to make sense of what was happening. Slowly, I moved closer, my breath coming in short bursts. As I crossed the threshold, I felt the temperature drop even more, a cold draft swirling around me. The source of the light turned out to be a small oil lamp sitting on a rickety table. It didn't look like it belonged there. The glass was smudged, and the flame danced, hesitant as if unsure if it should burn at all. My eyes shifted around the room, taking in the peeling wallpaper and the grimy floorboards. More dolls stared back at me, their hollow eyes filled with a quiet kind of terror. Then I heard it again. "Help us." The voices seemed to swirl around me and I shivered. They were children, whispering through the walls and the shadowy corners, and the fear I had felt before rushed back to me. I was not alone. "Who are you?" I called out, my voice trembling. "What do you need?" The air felt charged as I waited for an answer. The flickering light illuminated a doorway at the far end of the cabin just beyond the table. My instinct screamed at me to leave, but something pushed me to stay, to keep searching for answers. With hesitant steps I approached the doorway, and I felt the darkness growing thicker around me. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath. Then, a chilling breeze swept through, extinguishing the lamp's flame. In an instant, I was plunged into darkness. Panic seized me as I fumbled for the doorway. I caught a glimpse of something bright out of the corner of my eye, a flicker of red. The same faded red coat. The child was back, but this time there was no laughter. Only a sad, earnest look seemed to plead with me to follow. "Please," it whispered, barely above a breath. Against every instinct, I stepped into the darker hallway that led off from the main room. The air was heavy, as though the walls were closing in. I was caught in a push and pull of fear and curiosity. What was down this path? My hands shook as I reached for the wall, fingers brushing against something rough and pulsing with history. Then I felt it, a small hand grab mine, cold and clammy. I stifled a scream, but I didn't pull away. Instead, I followed the ghostly touch deeper into the cabin, down another hallway lined with more dolls and old photographs. But the faces in the pictures were all of children, their eyes wide and filled with sorrow, as if they had witnessed something terrible. And just as suddenly as they had begun, the whispers stopped, replaced by silence. It felt too quiet. The absence of noise pressed in on me. I turned to look back, but the hallway behind me was gone. Instead, a door stood before me, its handle glinting in the murky light. I hesitated. Should I open it? I had to know what lay beyond, perhaps the truth behind those lost souls. I reached for the handle, heart racing, but before I could turn it, I heard footsteps approaching from the other side. They were slow and deliberate, echoing in the silence and sending a chill down my spine. Someone was in the house. I held my breath, straining to listen. The footsteps grew closer and I felt a wave of dread wash over me. I couldn't stay here. Every part of me screamed to run, but I was frozen. The door stood in front of me, promising answers, but fear pinched my throat tight. "Please." The whispering voice from before floated through my mind, urging me silently to push forward. But how could I? What if what waited on the other side was worse than what I already faced? I took a step back, retreating from the door. My fingers brushed against the wall, searching for a way out. But just as I turned to flee, the door creaked open. A narrow beam of light spilled out from the other side, illuminating a shadowy figure. It stood silhouetted in the glow, and for a brief moment I thought of the little boy in the red coat. "Come," the figure beckoned, the voice low and smooth. "You can help us." My heart hammered in my chest. Who was this? Was it friend or foe? The fact that they knew I could help was both a comfort and a terror. I stepped forward, drawn in despite the warnings of my mind. As I crossed the threshold, the figure started to take shape. It was a woman, her face pale and gaunt, her eyes wide and searching. There was something familiar about her. The more I looked, the more I recognized her from the photographs on the walls. You were one of them," I mumbled. "Yes," she replied, her voice a soft whisper. We all were. Were? I echoed, swallowed by confusion. What do you mean? She pointed behind her into the room beyond. Come see. I hesitated only for a moment before stepping inside. The room was dim, shadows dancing where the light couldn't reach. But there, laying on an old table, was a collection of objects covered in dust. A doll, a broken music box, and a tiny frayed dress. These belong to us, the woman said, her voice breaking. We never had the chance to leave. I felt the air thicken, suffocating in its weight. Leave? Where? What happened to you? Her expression faded into something akin to despair. We were trapped. It was something dark. It still lingers here, feeding off our memories, our dreams. We need help to be free. I stepped forward, drawn to a small locking box at the edge of the table. Its surface was etched with patterns, some resembling that old wallpaper. My fingers brushed the latch, and chills raced down my spine. I needed to know what was inside. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the hall, interrupting my thoughts. My heart jumped as shadows shifted in the room. Panic surged within me. Someone's here, I gasped, turning to the woman. She looked back, eyes wide with fear. We have to hurry before it finds you. Before I could respond, the shadows elongated, and I saw a figure moving toward us from the dark hallway. It was tall and ominous, and it bore down on me like a nightmare made flesh. Where are you going? It growled. I had no choice. I was trapped. I backed away from the table, heart pounding as the ominous figure advanced. The woman beside me seemed to fade into the background, her ghostly presence nothing more than a whisper in the chaos. Please, we have to run. I barely managed to shout, but my feet refused to cooperate. The figure lurched forward, its shadow stretching across the floor like an ink stain. I could make out its features now, the hollow eyes, the jagged edges of its mouth that twisted into a grin. Panic surged through my veins, urging me to react. Help us! The woman cried, her voice now a desperate plea. You have to find the light. Light? I stammered, hands trembling. What light? But before she could answer, the air grew heavy, pressing down like a weight on my chest. I felt the chill seep into my skin. The figure's breath was ragged, a sound that echoed in the empty room like a warning bell. Then, without warning, the room shifted. The walls began to blur, the old photographs swirling around me. I stumbled, feeling as though I was being pulled in multiple directions. I thought I saw the boy in the red coat again, standing at the edge of my vision, his eyes pleading. Follow him, the woman urged. He can guide you. I knew I had only seconds before the figure lunged. With a burst of adrenaline, I darted past the table, instinct guiding me as I felt the warmth of the woman's spectral form flicker in my wake. I ran toward the doorway, the soft light growing brighter the closer I got. Wait, she called after me. You have to free us. I burst through the door, the sudden brightness nearly blinding. I stumbled into a long hallway lined with doors, each one painted in shades of gray and despair. I turned back, wanting to look at the woman one last time, but the doorway was fading. Find the light. Her voice was an echo, fading with the mist. I ran down the corridor, my heart racing, and that's when I saw it. A faint light flickered beneath one of the doors at the end. It pulsed like a heartbeat. I pushed against the cold surface, the door creaking open to reveal another dim room filled with old furniture draped in white sheets. In the corner there was a small window. The light I had seen was filtering through, illuminating a dusty old chandelier covered in cobwebs. Hope surged in my chest. Maybe this was the escape I needed. But as I took a step forward, the shadows in the room thickened. They twisted and morphed into forms that crept toward me, snaking around the furniture and closing in. Stay back, I shouted, panic escalating again. But the shadows didn't listen. They surged forward, and I felt an icy grip close around my throat. I gasped for breath, struggling against the sensation squeezing me tighter. Just then, something caught my eye. At the edge of the room lay a small, polished key glinting in the light. I had no idea what it opened, but I felt I had no choice. As the shadows closed in, I dove for it, my fingers wrapping around the cool metal. The grip around my throat loosened, and I could breathe again. The shadows hesitated. "Open it!" a voice cried out from nowhere. I looked back toward the door I had just fled. That's when I realized I wasn't safe yet. I gripped the key tightly in my hand, feeling its smooth surface anchor me in the chaos around me. The shadows paused, almost as if they were waiting, their forms swirling indecisively. I didn't have time to wonder why they hesitated. I needed a plan. I glanced at the door I had just come through. It felt like my only escape. But then the whispers returned, soft, nagging voices urging me to stay. "Open it," they hissed in unison, a chorus of despair. I looked around at the shrouded furniture. "What door?" I shouted back, fearing I wouldn't like the answer. There was nowhere else to go. I turned to the nearest sheet-covered piece of furniture. I lifted the edge and saw a large, ancient-looking mirror. Its surface was dulled and cracked, but I thought I caught a glimmer of the light radiating from the key in my palm. What if I used the key on the mirror? Maybe it led to the light. My heart skipped a beat at the thought. In my mind it flickered with potential, but I was terrified of what might happen if I was wrong. Still, I couldn't stay here with the shadows closing in. I rushed toward the mirror and studied the edges. There were no obvious locks, but there had to be a way. The key felt warm against my skin, and a sense of urgency built inside me. The shadows sensed it too. They began to creep closer again, more aggressive, their shapes contorting threateningly. "Please work," I whispered to the mirror, pressing the key against its frame. I held my breath, willing something to happen. Nothing. Just the dull, lifeless reflection of the room staring back at me. "Try harder," the voices urged. "It's so close." I stepped back, frustrated and frightened. The shadows were relentless now, moving like a tide that threatened to drown me. I needed more time. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus again on the key. Maybe I was meant to find another door, not this one. I dashed back to where I had entered, moving hastily. The door stood there, still ajar. The light beyond it was flickering, and the echo of the woman's voice reverberated in my mind. "Find the light." "Okay, just go," I urged myself. Gripping the doorknob tightly, I pushed it open. To my surprise, the hallway that had seemed so long before had shifted. Instead of the same gray doors, there was an entirely new scene. A festive, garish Christmas display lit up the hallway. Twinkling lights adorned the walls, colored ornaments hung from the ceiling. However, it all felt wrong, like a scene from a bad dream. The laughter of children echoed, but it held a sinister undertone. I could see silhouettes darting in and out of the shadows, faces obscured. What was this place? Could it truly be festive as it looked? Or was it another trick? Before I could decide, a figure slipped through one of the glowing doorways and I froze. It was the boy in the red coat. His gaze was locked onto me, pleading silently, but knowing I needed to make a choice. I could either run deeper into the illusion or turn back to face the shadows. Then I heard it. A sharp cry came from somewhere down the hallway, piercing the cheerful facade. The shadows were not far behind, and they were closing in on me once again. I didn't know what lay ahead, but it was clear I couldn't afford to hesitate. The boy turned and ran, darting into the light. I took a breath, tightened my grip on the key, and chased after him. The hallway seemed to spiral as I ran, the lights growing brighter, the laughter louder. One thought raced through my mind. Whatever awaited me, it was time to face it. The boy in the red coat dashed forward, the light glinting off his jacket as he rounded a corner. I forced my legs to move faster, even as dread gnawed at my insides. The laughter grew louder, wrapping around me like a thick fog. It was cheerful, yet something about it made my skin crawl. I followed the boy into a large room that felt impossibly vast compared to the tight hallways. The walls were decked with garland and twinkling lights, but the brightness felt harsh and almost suffocating. In the center of the room stood a towering Christmas tree, laden with ornaments that sparkled with malevolence. The boy stopped short in front of it and turned to me, eyes wide with fear. You have to help me, he pleaded, his voice shaky. They're coming. What do you mean, who? I glanced around, my heart racing faster. The shadows seemed to pulse with energy, their whispers becoming clearer, a dull chant echoing through the room. Don't let them take you, he warned, backing away toward the equally ominous shadows looming at the edges of the bright space. That's when I noticed it. A group of children, their faces obscured by their masks, were gathered near the tree. Their laughter was unnaturally bright, but I saw the flashes of sharp teeth as they grinned. They were playing a game of sorts, tossing small ornaments back and forth between each other like grenades, the impact echoing balefully through the room. Get back, I shouted, realizing too late the danger was all around me. The children stopped, their laughter cut off, and turned to face me. With eyes that gleamed in the dim light, they froze, and I felt the shadows press in closer, encouraging them, waiting for something. Instinctively, I clutched the key tighter. Stay away from me, I yelled, but the words came out weaker than I intended. I focused on the boy, who was still watching me with pleading eyes. What do we do? Use the key, he yelled back, pointing at the tree. The light, it's in there, it's the only way out. The shadows thickened around me, closing in, robbing me of my strength. I had no choice. I sprinted straight to the tree, the pulse of energy in the room directing me. I could feel the warmth of the key radiate against my palm. It felt almost alive. Reaching the base of the tree, I knelt among the colorful presents piled high. With a trembling hand, I began to search for any kind of lock or opening. My breath caught when I spotted a small, intricate design carved into the trunk. It looked like a keyhole, but it was covered in glimmering baubles that seemed to dance around it. Over here, I called to the boy who was still watching nervously from a distance. I fumbled with the ornaments, pulling them off, revealing more of the keyhole. Suddenly the shadows surged forward, relentless, angry, and hungry. Please work, I shouted, pushing the key into the hole. The shock of suddenly finding a match made my heart thud. I twisted it, praying for a miracle. But at that precise moment, all of the children laughed again, that maddening, eerie laughter. The room grew darker, pulsing with shadows, then everything went black. I inhaled sharply, realizing I couldn't even see my own hands in front of me. An overwhelming dread surrounded me, the faint laughter lingering as I sensed shadows circling my mind. I had to find the light before it was too late. I gasped, desperate for breath in the suffocating blackness. It felt like the shadows had wrapped themselves around me, pressing inward, taunting me. I could still hear the laughter echoing, each peal sharper than the last, filled with something sinister. As I stood there paralyzed, I thought of the boy in the red coat. I strained to remember his face, his desperation, and my heart pounded harder. We have to find the light, I whispered to the darkness, though uncertainty gnawed at me. How could I find anything in this void? Then a flicker. A small winking glow appeared ahead of me. I stepped toward it, unsure if it was real or just a cruel trick of the shadows. Cautiously I moved forward, the glow growing brighter with each step. It was strange, warm, almost inviting, contrasting with the cold dread that surrounded me. Suddenly I was knocked off balance as if someone had elbowed me in the ribs. Oof! I exclaimed, barely able to steady myself. More laughter. This time it echoed from somewhere close by, mocking me. I spun around, searching for the source. Show yourself, I shouted, emboldened by the light ahead. The laughter stopped, and in the sudden silence, a chilling feeling crept over me as I caught sight of a figure emerging from the darkness. It was one of the masked children from before, but now the mask was off. The child smiled, mouth too wide, teeth too sharp. My instincts screamed. I turned to run, but the light flickered, dimming, and then resurfacing like a heartbeat. Proximity to it seemed to repel the shadows momentarily, and I sprinted towards it, determined. The child's voice rang out. You can't escape the game! I ran faster, adrenaline flooding my veins as I reached the glow. It wasn't merely a light. It was an old lantern, dust-covered with intricate carvings. My fingers brushed against its surface, and as I did, the light blazed fiercely. Breathe, I urged myself, feeling a surge of energy. Suddenly the shadows recoiled. I held the lantern close, illuminating all the stifling darkness around me, revealing more grotesque children emerging from the void. They stood there, hissing and clawing at the air, the laughter replaced by eerie silence now filled with frustration. Use the key, I remembered, fingers tightening around it. I had to open that keyhole. Some instinct pushed me to aim the lantern at the tree again. The image of the keyhole flashed in my mind, and I sprinted back, dodging grasping shadows hungry for the warmth I carried. When I arrived at the base of the tree, my heart sank. The keyhole was now covered, as if the ornaments had reattached themselves. No, 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 I cried, frantic. I began pulling them off once more, but the laughter grew bolder, swirling around me, wrapping like ropes. Not this time, I shouted defiantly, planting the lantern firmly down. I took a breath as I felt the warmth of the key emanate from my pocket. It had to work. I just needed to believe. With a shaking hand, I reached for the key, and out of the corner of my eye I saw the boy in the red coat watching intently. The realization hit me hard. I had to do this for him too. But just as I finally lodged the key into the revealed hole, the shadows surged forward, a flood of darkness that threatened to drown out the light. Please let this work, I yelled as I twisted it with all my might, desperate for the release that felt just within reach. It was now or never. The key turned smoothly in the lock, and a pulse of warmth burst through the air like sunlight breaking clouds. The shadows screamed, a cacophony of lost voices and anger, but their wails faded, swallowed by the radiance pouring from the tree. As the key clicked into place, a rush of energy surged through me, embracing me in its glow. The ornaments fell away, cascading to the ground like fallen leaves, revealing the hollow trunk of the tree, a doorway opening into the unknown. Without thought, I stepped through. The world exploded into color. I found myself outside, the night air crisp, the sky above dotted with stars. In front of me stood the boy in the red coat, no longer a spectral figure but vibrant and real. He beamed at me, eyes wide with gratitude. "You did it," he cheered, laughter erupting from him like bubbles of joy. "Where are the others? Are they okay?" I asked, glancing around, half expecting the other children to appear with him. He pointed toward the tree, which now stood resolutely behind me, its branches swaying in a gentle breeze as if beckoning the other spirits to join us. "They'll come through when they can. You helped them find the light." "Thank you." A warmth spread through my chest, but shadows still loomed in the distance, barely visible. Their edges were blurred, lingering just beyond the reach of the lantern's glow. I turned back toward the tree, confusion thrumming through me. Are they gone?" He nodded. "They'll be free to move on now. It's time for them to find peace." I wanted to feel relief, but as I stood there, those dark forms loomed larger, nearly imperceptibly shifting in the corners of my vision. I could sense their anger and hunger, but no longer did they seem to pursue me with the same intensity. "Will they follow me?" My voice wavered, unsure if I wanted an answer at all. "No," he replied, his expression serious now. "You found the key. You created the light. They won't come after you as long as you remember." My heart sank. I still didn't understand everything. Was it real, or a reflection of my own fears? As the boy smiled at me, I realized he would carry the story forward. But would I ever fully know the truth? And then, just as quickly as he appeared, he faded into the night, the edges of his form shimmering like a mirage. I stood alone, gazing at the tree that had freed them. I took a deep breath, wrapping my arms around myself as the crisp air filled my lungs. I focused on the stars, but my thoughts remained tangled up in unanswered questions. Was this town truly haunted, or had I been swept away in my own mind? The children were free now, but the whispers would linger, echoes of laughter that were both a blessing and a curse. I walked back toward my cabin, a nervous weight still lingering in my gut. I would never fully escape the memories of the night, and nor would I want to. They had helped me understand something profound about connection and loss, how the past clings to the living. I moved to a different city a few weeks later, the mountains fading into the background. I still think about that night sometimes, wondering if the tree remains, the children laughing in the starlight, and shadows lurking just out of reach. I can't help but wonder if they still need help or if they've finally found peace. In my heart, I hope they have. But a part of me knows that as long as I remember, the echoes will haunt me, keeping me tethered to that strange, enchanted winter night.